Fellas, 2025 has been quite a big year for retirements. I mean, we've had two big ones in the last month, so I thought I'd go through every UFC fighter that should hang up the gloves and retire in 2025. And we'll start off with the flyweight division. Now, flyweight's quite tough because a lot of the flyweights tend to be quite young. A lot of them have an average age of about 20 to 30, but I'm going to go with Tim Elliott for the only one in the flyweight division. And I say this because Tim Elliott's 38 years old, 38 competing at flyweight. He's also been inactive for 2 years. He hasn't fought since, I think, December of 2023. So I think his last fight should be against Kai Sakura at UFC 317. Now, there's a high chance he gets starched by Kai Sakura. I'm not going to do a full-blown prediction now, but I'm leaning towards Asakura winning that fight. And this is probably the biggest fight he's going to get. Main card, not main card, but, you know, big fight on a pay-per-view against a big star in Kai Sakura. Even if Tim Elliott wins this fight, I don't see there being any major fights next for Tim Elliott. So I think he should take advantage of the opportunity. 38 years old, retire, win or loss against Kai Sakura at UFC 319. So get the fight done. Beat Asakura, lose to Asakura, whatever happens. If he loses, he should definitely retire. But if he wins, I mean, you're coming off a win over a big star on a pay-per-view. Perfect place for 38-year-old Tim Elliott to retire. So I think Tim Elliott should be the only guy I can really think of at 125 who really needs to retire. Bantamweight, I'm going to go with Henry Cejudo as my first one. Yeah, Cejudo might have had the worst retirement plan in UFC history. He was in his prime, double champion. He was absolutely killing it in the UFC. This big money streak with a bunch of legends on the name. And he could have continued his prime, chased greatness, become one of the greatest of all time. He decided not to, and he retires in the middle of his prime, hangs up the gloves, decides in his prime he wants to retire, and then he sits out and becomes washed after a few years, and then comes up with a genius plan to come back to the UFC after he's washed. Against Aljamain Sterling, loses to Sterling. Does it again against Merab, loses to Merab. Does it again against Song Yudong, loses to Song Yudong. And he's just ruining his legacy. So I feel like for Cejudo, rather than taking another loss, he should just retire. I don't even think a retirement fight should be extremely necessary for Cejudo. He should have been gone by now. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. He's looked worse with each performance. He was losing that fight to Song Yudong before the controversy as well. So Cejudo should hang up the gloves. He's just, you know, destroying his legacy with each loss he takes. Retire, leave the sport, and you've already had a decent legacy. Don't destroy it anymore. And I'm also going to go with Deiveson Figueiredo in the bantamweight division. Yeah, Figueiredo's 37 years old, which again for a bantamweight is quite old in age, and I don't understand why he's still around. He's achieved everything. He's one of the greatest flyweights of all time. He's obviously a former flyweight champion, and he's had a nice little run to start his bantamweight run. But in his last two fights, he's obviously lost to PT and he got outclassed by PT last year. And he's just had a career-altering injury against Corey Sandhagen, which for me should be the turning point of him retiring. His last fight, I think, should just be retirement. I don't think, again, he needs to have a retirement fight. I think he should just retire now. Again, the injury is the main reason as well. I don't know how long he's going to be out for because of that injury he took against Sandhagen. I assume he's going to be gone for the rest of the year. And he looked terrible in that fight with Sandhagen too. Despite the injury, he looked awful in that fight. So I think for Figueiredo, yeah, just hang up the gloves. Obviously, I'm not saying he can't compete. I'm sure there's a lot of guys in the top 15 he can still beat, but 37 years old, former flyweight champion. You've already been there, done it. You've got the legacy. So I think for Deiveson Figueiredo, rather than trying to compete at the top, I think now would be a good time to retire, especially with the injury. Featherweight division. I think Edson Barboza is one of the only featherweights I think should desperately retire. This guy's 39 years old in the featherweight division. And if you look at his last fight against Lerone Murphy, he got absolutely battered in that fight. I'm not saying he didn't make it competitive, but he took an absolute beating. He took a shit ton of damage against Lerone Murphy, which is probably why he's been gone for so long. And he's just taking unnecessary damage at this moment in time. Now, he is booked at UFC 319 against Drakkar Klose, and I think this should be his last fight. Yeah, he's booked against Drakkar Klose, and I do think he's actually going to go out there and chin Drakkar Klose. I'm favouring Edson Barboza to win that fight. I think he gets the job done because, again, he's not completely washed, but if he just shows up, delivers a KO, and retires in style, you couldn't ask for a better retirement for Edson Barboza. He's on a pay-per-view. He's been out for nearly 2 years. God knows how he's going to look coming back. If he can go out there and get a good one of a Drakkar Klose, he should take that opportunity, retire on a pay-per-view at 39 years old, get the job done against Drakkar Klose. I think Edson Barboza should definitely retire. He's taking too much damage at this point in his career. He's just lost to Lerone Murphy. Again, I'm not saying he can't make it competitive with these younger guys because he can. I mean, he got that really good win before that Lerone Murphy fight. But I think at this moment, you've got the perfect time to retire on a pay-per-view. Go out there, slump Drakkar Klose, put the gloves down. Perfect for Edson Barboza. Then at lightweight, I think Michael Chandler should retire at this moment in time in the lightweight division. Yeah, this guy is 2-4 in the 2-5 now in the UFC, and in his last 3, he's been submitted by Dustin Poirier, dominated by Oliveira, and absolutely battered by Paddy Pimblett. He's 39 years old. He's not getting better with every performance. He's washed. He's taking too much damage. I don't understand why Michael Chandler's sticking around. Knowing the UFC, they're probably going to stick him in a #1 contender fight. knowing the look of Michael Chandler. But I think his last fight should be against either Mauricio Houfi or Benoit Saint-Denis, because I think it makes sense. It's a big name, and Michael Chandler is big name and low skill. He's got a big name, a lot of name value, doesn't really have the skill to go with it. It's perfect to build someone's name off him. Mauricio Houfi would absolutely ice out Michael Chandler, and there, if Mauricio Houfi does that, you've got a new star at 55, while you take out the trashy Michael Chandler. And say for Benoit Saint-Denis, I know he's not exactly the hottest guy coming up because he's already lost to Moicano and Dustin Poirier, but again, it helps rebuild Benoit Saint-Denis if he can go out there and massacre Michael Chandler, which he probably would do. So for Michael Chandler, he's already had a legacy. Again, I'd probably just use his name value to build the name of one of these up-and-coming guys like Mauricio Houfi, Benoit Saint-Denis, even somebody like Fares Ziam or Yoel Alvarez, just some up-and-coming guy at 155. Let them beat the shit out of Michael Chandler, and then Michael Chandler can go on and retire, because at this point, what is he sticking around for, apart from a paycheck? You ain't getting the McGregor fight. That's out the window, and he has been for 2 years, so Michael Chandler should retire. Robert Green should also retire at 155. Yeah, Bobby Green's 38 years old, which isn't exactly, like, significantly old, but still getting up there in age for 155, and he's just been spinning wheel kicked brutally by Mauricio Houfi in one of the best KOs of this year, and he got absolutely demolished and put to sleep. Nearly broke his arm in that same sequence against Paddy Pimblett last year as well. He also got brutally KO'd in one of the most brutal KOs in UFC history against Jalin Turner, where he definitely lost a few years of his life in that performance. And you look at his past couple of wins as well. I mean, he beat Grant Dawson and Tony Ferguson, but I mean, apart from clipping Grant Dawson, Tony Ferguson ain't a great win, and he got finished by Makhachev and Drew Dober too. I just feel like he's speedrunning damage at this time. He's also going to be fighting at UFC 319, and I think his last fight should be against Diego Ferreira. Yeah, he's going to take a lot of damage against Diego Ferreira. He is fighting someone similar to his age, and it's definitely the most winnable fight he's had in a while, but if you know Diego Ferreira, the guy goes out there to brawl. So I think for Bobby Green, win or lose, let that be the last fight. Again, similar to the other guys, you beat Diego Ferreira, you're back in the winning column, you're coming off a win, perfect time to retire on a pay-per-view. You lose to him, then what's the point in sticking around? 3-fight losing streak, potentially 3 finishes, hang up the gloves, Bobby Green needs to go. Welterweight, I think Gilbert Burns is one of the welterweights I think needs to retire soon. He's on a 4-fight losing streak. He gets outclassed by Belal Muhammad in a #1 contender fight. Outstruck by Belal Muhammad. Not too much shame in that. He then gets knocked out in pretty brutal fashion by JDM. Again, JDM's the current champion. Wasn't too much shame in that. And then he faces Sean Brady late last year. Gets outclassed by Sean Brady across 25 minutes, predominantly on the feet as well, and he's starting to look bad. And now he's just been blasted by Michael Morales in the first round, and now he's on a 4-fight winning streak with 2 finishes. He's 39 years old. He's getting up there in age. He's not as talented anymore. He can't compete with the top contenders. He has nothing to prove anymore. So I think his last fight should be against somebody like Daniel Rodriguez. I think that's the perfect last fight for Gilbert Burns, and it's because it's the most winnable fight he's had in a while. You know, Gilbert Burns, to be fair, has had a bit of a murderer's row in the welterweight division. D-Rod's definitely winnable. It's a similar skill level at this moment in time to Gilbert Burns too, so I think he should take on D-Rod. It's the most winnable fight he's had in a while. Win or lose, I think he should retire. You beat D-Rod, you're back in the winning column after a few years. Perfect time to retire, because if you don't, you're going to end up getting finished by another top contender. And if you lose to D-Rod, I mean, that should be, you know, the perfect message that you need to retire. If Gilbert Burns can't compete with Daniel Rodriguez in 2025, just leave the sport. It's as simple as that. So win or loss, Gilbert Burns needs to go. I'm also going to go with Stephen Thompson as well. Now, don't get me wrong, Stephen Thompson can still compete, but he's 42 years old at welterweight, and he has been losing the vast majority of his recent fights, even though I do think he should have won his most recent fight against Gabriel Bonfim. But in some of these losses, knocked out by Joaquin Buckley, which at his age isn't going to do him any good. Got finished and mauled by Shavkat Rakhmonov a few years ago as well. I think he should have a nice retirement send-off, like maybe a fight night main event. And I think maybe like a Muslim Salikov, maybe not for a main event, but Muslim Salikov is the perfect fight for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, because it's a dream fight. You've got the karate of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus the kung fu of Muslim Salikov, a guy who's known for his unique striking in the welterweight division against another guy who's known for his unique striking in the welterweight division in Muslim Salikov. And I think after UFC Abu Dhabi, this is a fight that a lot of people want to see. And to make it even better, it's at a similar age. Stephen Thompson's 42, Muslim Salikov's 41. Unks who have great striking. It's a dream fight ticked off in the welterweight division. It's a favourable style for Stephen Thompson. He's not having to face another up-and-coming grappler. It's the same age as well, so you can't blame the age for Stephen Thompson. That is the perfect fight. And I would also add that it's probably the most winnable fight he's had in a while. Like I said, because he's not having to worry about grappling, it's a pure striking matchup, but he's not just getting a free win because Salikov's killing it right now. Stephen Thompson, Muslim Salikov. For Stephen Thompson's last fight, it can't be any better. It's a dream fight, dream style, similar age. That, in my opinion, should be the last fight for Stephen Thompson. So get him on a pay-per-view later on this year against Muslim Salikov. And I think that should be the final fight of Stephen Thompson's career. Colby Covington at this point should also probably hang the gloves up too. Yeah, Colby Covington is, I mean, first of all, he's fighting on average once a year. I don't even know if he's going to fight this year, but on average, he's fighting once a year, and he's been losing most of his recent fights. He obviously lost that title fight to Leon Edwards, where he looked awful in that performance. And then it eventually kind of just showed up to take a paycheck against Joaquin Buckley because he got battered that entire fight too. And his last win was Jorge Masvidal back in 2022. He's 37 years old. He refuses to fight down as well. He's not really one of these guys that you can build a name off, because Colby doesn't strike me as the type of guy who's going to want to fight down in the rankings against the prospect. Nobody really cares about him in 2025. So at this point, what is the point in having Colby Covington on the roster? He is just a ranking spotter. He sits on his ranking spot, doesn't really fight that often, shows up once a year for a paycheck, and according to recent fights, gets battered too. So get Colby Covington out of the UFC. And Rafael dos Anjos as well. 40 years old, competing in the welterweight division. Not only is he 40, but he's also had the most octagon fight time in the UFC. He's been around for a long, long time. He got injured in his most recent fight against Jeff Neal, which again, when you're getting old, like 39, 40 years old, and you're getting injured, that should be a message that you need to retire. He got smothered by Gamrot before that. He then got a dominant loss to Vicente Luque before that. Father Time caught up to this guy a long time ago. I think his last fight should be against Nico Price in Rio. The UFC have recently announced they're going to Rio in October of this year, which is not usually when they go to Brazil, but they're going to Rio in October. So get Rafael dos Anjos on that card. He's one of the, I don't want to say one of the better, he's definitely not one of the better Brazilian fighters, but he's one of the more well-known names in Brazil. Like I said, former champion, been around for a long time. Get him in Brazil in front of his home people and give him Nico Price. Very, very winnable fight for dos Anjos. He probably wins that fight. So let him get a win in Brazil and then hang the gloves up, because again, I don't really think he knows what he wants to do in his career. He's bouncing up and down 155 to 170. He's losing fights on a consistent basis. He hasn't won for a few years as well. Give him a free win in Brazil, and that's where he should retire. And I'm also going to go with Neil Magny too. Yeah, Neil Magny, 37 years old, which to be fair for welterweight isn't too old, but he once had the reputation for being the greatest gatekeeper, which I guess isn't the greatest reputation. Now he's just washed. I mean, he got bullied by Ian Gary a few fights back. He then beats Mike Mallet, where he was losing the fight dominantly, and gets a huge comeback. He then gets TKO'd by Michael Morales and then got knocked the fuck out in his most recent fight by Carlos Prates. He's slowing down, and he's now booked to fight Zaleski dos Santos, I think, this week. If he loses this fight, he should pack it up. If he loses to Zaleski dos Santos, I mean, now he's going to be on a 3-fight losing streak, potentially 3 finishes. He's going to be nowhere near the top 15. I don't think he really brings anything significant to the UFC, again, apart from shutting down prospects and beating these random-ass fighters. So Neil Magny, at this stage in his career, again, he's been in the UFC for a long time. Just retire. He's got nothing to prove. If he does lose to Zaleski dos Santos, which I think he will do, just hang the gloves up, Magny. I don't want to see my favourite prospect at 170 lose to fucking Neil Magny of all people. Middleweight. Adesanya, I think, should retire in the middleweight division now. The main reason is, what's in it for him anymore? Again, I'm not saying he cannot compete against the top 15, but he's a former champion in the middleweight division. He's one of the greatest middleweights of all time. He's had massive moments. He's one of the most memorable middleweights in the UFC history. What is in it for him anymore? In his last 3, he's been bullied by Sean Strickland in a massive underdog performance. He got submitted by Dricus du Plessis in an undeserved title shot. And now to kick off the year, he's just been knocked out by Nasruddin Imavov. I think everybody in the top 6 of the division all beat Adesanya. It's time to retire at this moment in time. Again, I'm not saying there isn't anybody in the top 15 Adesanya beats, but what's the point anymore? I think a perfect last fight is going to be MVP if MVP can beat Jared Cannonier. This is, again, one of those dream fights. Like, this is one of those fights that I think MMA fans have kind of looked at for a while and I guess wanted. Adesanya versus MVP, the battle of the striking styles. Now, again, it could be a boring, fight for 25 minutes where they both just stare at each other, but I'd be really interested to see the striking style. Adesanya versus MVP. Again, a bit of a dream fight. Probably one of the more favourable fights Adesanya's had in a while, so I think for Adesanya, I'm not saying he should just retire off the bat on social media. I do think he deserves like a big retirement event, but imagine like a fight night main event in a crowded arena. Adesanya versus MVP for Adesanya's last fight, Adesanya's send-off, or maybe even like a pay-per-view co-main event. I think that'd be huge. So for Adesanya, get him one more fight. I think MVP's the perfect opponent if he beats Cannonier. Get that fight done. And also Adesanya's old foe, Robert Whittaker, I think should also retire. Now, Robert Whittaker, he's quite young, 34 years old. That's when most fighters are around their prime, especially in the middleweight division. But he's made it very evident that he only wants to stick around if he wants to win the belt. He wants about 3 to 4 more fights. This was before the Rinna fight. He wants 3 to 4 more fights and wants to get a title shot. Well, he's never touching gold again. He's been finished by Dricus du Plessis a couple of fights ago. He got submitted and, Obviously, his jaw nearly broken in half by Khamzat Chimaev. And now he's just lost a close fight to Reinier de Ridder. Don't get me wrong, he's still a top contender, but he's also looking worse. And the champion ambitions for Robert Whittaker is over. I think it's very safe to say he's never touching gold. So I think his last fight should be against Brendan Allen in Perth. I already went over why Brendan Allen should be the next opponent for Whittaker in the matchmaking video after UFC Abu Dhabi. But yeah, the UFC, they're probably going to go to Perth early 2026. They always go to Perth and usually around February time. So get Whittaker in front of his home people, in front of Australia, in front of Perth, maybe potentially like a main event for a fight night if they can fit a fight night in later on this year. Whittaker versus Brendan Allen in Perth, I think will be the perfect fight to do because it's a winnable fight for Robert Whittaker. He's fighting down in the rankings, but it's also obviously his final fight. He gets to do it in front of his home people because there isn't really any up-and-coming middleweights I think really make sense against Whittaker right now. Brendan Allen's like the only other guy. I mean, you've got Abbas Magomedov, but apart from that, I'd say Brendan Allen's the only guy on the middleweight division who I can see him fighting down against. So Whittaker, Allen, I think Whittaker should only have one more fight left. And on top of that as well, it makes sense from a ranking perspective. He's number 7, Allen's number 11. That makes sense. Anyway, Bo Nickel should also retire from the sport of MMA. Yeah, he's obviously just been finished by Reinier de Ridder where he took a knee to the chest and decided that he didn't want any part of him anymore. If you have an inability to take pain, if you have an inability to absorb strikes, you shouldn't be in the UFC. I think wrestling is what Bo Nickel's built for. You don't get me wrong, great wrestler, had a big background in wrestling. I'm not saying he's bad at wrestling or anything, but if you can't take a strike, get back to wrestling. So I think that's exactly what Bo Nickel should go do. Get back to wrestling. I don't really care where he wrestles. I think he's just been signed by a freestyle American wrestling promotion too. So for Bo Nickel, I don't think MMA is for him. I know he had these big talks that he's going to destroy Khabib and destroy Chimaev and all this stuff. Well, that's clearly not happening because one shot to the body, you're done for. And I think now that everybody knows that, he's only going to make Bo Nickel more vulnerable. And again, it's not even like a skill thing for Bo Nickel where it's like, oh, he needs to sharpen up his striking. He's just simply not built for MMA. Get back to wrestling, stop talking shit, and I think he should retire too. Jack Hermansson is another guy that I think should probably retire in the middleweight division. Yeah, he's just been brutally knocked out. And again, one of the more brutal KOs this year against Gregor Rodriguez where he got knocked out and then a huge hammer fist to the jaw to put the cherry on top. He's not going to be back for a year. After that knockout, he ain't going to be back for a year, and he's 37 years old. He's been a bit of a win-loss fighter recently, hasn't really got any great wins, and he's been finishing a few of those losses too. So I think Jack Hermansson should probably pack it up. You've just been brutally knocked out. You're not going to be anywhere near the top 15. You can't really put the winning streak together. You've had your prime back in 2020, 2021. So Jack Hermansson, another guy in the middleweight division that I think should retire. Now, light heavyweight. I think Jan Blachowicz should probably retire this year in the light heavyweight division. Yeah, Jan Blachowicz, in his most recent fights, he loses to Carlos Ulberg. He loses to Alex Pereira. He should have lost to Magomed Ankalaev in what was a draw. He then beats Alexander Rakic, but it was an injury. Alexander Rakic hurt his knee. And then he loses to Glover Teixeira as he gets finished for the title fight. He's 42 years old again. I know it's light heavyweight. It's not as bad to be old in those later divisions, but he's still 42. Again, he has nothing to prove. You're a former light heavyweight champion. You've got the gold before. You've had the great knockouts. You've had the highlight reels. What are you still competing for? What is your plan? So I think he should have a retirement fight. And I think Bogdan Guskov's an opponent that makes sense. If Jan Blachowicz beats Bogdan Guskov, well, he retires on a positive. What more can you want? You get to shut down one of these guys with a lot of hype. You retire on a positive. And if Bogdan wins, well, you've got a new contender at 205. A knockout machine who's just beaten the former champion in Jan Blachowicz to enter the top 5 of the light heavyweight division. It's a win-win either way. So I feel like for Jan Blachowicz, give him Bogdan Guskov, potentially even a main event. If you can do it in Poland, do it there because it makes sense to give Jan Blachowicz his rightful send-off. So, yeah, I think Jan Blachowicz, yeah, he should just retire. If he loses to Bogdan Guskov again, at that point, it's like, what are you still fighting for? You're losing fights every other year. You ain't touching gold. You ain't even fighting for gold again. 42 years old. You've held the belt before. At this point, just retire. You know what I mean? His last proper win was Adesanya back in 2021 or whatever. Yeah, 2021. So I think for Jan Blachowicz, he should probably retire too. And Paul Craig as well, I think should retire. He's 37 years old. Yeah, I think he's the most one-dimensional fighter in the UFC right now. Like, nobody anymore is going to fall for him pulling guard. That's not going to work in 2025. We've all seen you get the triangles. That ain't going to work no more. And you look at his most recent fights, I'm still surprised he's got a UFC contract. I mean, he's been finishing a lot of those losses too. Finished by Johnny Walker, Brendan Allen, and Kyle Browler. And in his most recent fight, he got a no contest, which should have been a DQ against Delfo Bellato. I know there was an Oscar-worthy performance in there, but he is now booked against Modestas Bukauskas. Most people, including myself, are alluding that Modestas Bukauskas is going to finish Paul Craig again in that fight. And I think Paul Craig should go over to some sort of grappling promotion, whether it be Karate Combat or Fury Pro Grappling. All he has is BJJ. He has no striking, he has no wrestling, he's got no ability to harm anybody apart from submission. So I think Paul Craig would be perfect in these jiu-jitsu promotions because that's where he shines. And he hasn't evolved his game. He's been around the UFC for a long time now. His prime was a couple of years ago, back in 2022, and he just doesn't evolve his game. I don't think weight is an issue for Paul Craig. I think it's just skill. No one's going to fall into a triangle choke no more. You aren't that good. You look shit in every performance. Paul Craig, BJJ is for you. I think you should go compete in BJJ, but MMA in the UFC, especially if you lose your most recent fight, I don't think you should be competing in MMA anymore. Heavyweight. Tatu Ivaza is probably the heavyweight that comes to mind that needs to retire. And in the last few fights, he's been finished by Cyril Gane, destroyed and ran through by Sergey Pavlovich, demolished and submitted by Alexander Volkov, submitted in a main event by Marcin Tybura, and just lost a Rosenstrike last year in October. And people might say he can bounce back. He's one of the more entertaining fighters on the roster. Mate, have you seen the size of Tatu Ivaza? Look at the size of him. He's about 350 pounds. This guy ain't coming back, and if he does, he ain't going to be coming back for years. He's nowhere near the octagon. He ain't coming back. And if he does come back to combat sports, BKFC should be the place for Tatu Ivaza. He's got zero wrestling whatsoever. I don't mind seeing Tatu Ivaza go and slump another guy in BKFC. I think that should be the place. He's a big name. He gets to still use his hands, which is his biggest, advantage. He doesn't have to deal with kicks, doesn't have to deal with grappling. Mate, even Dan Hooker's backyard promotion at this moment in time would probably be beneficial for Tatu Ivaza. So I think for Tatu Ivaza, 5-fight losing streak with a lot of finishes. Cannot compete with the new guys anymore. Fat as fuck. Get him away from the UFC. And on the topic of those top of guys, the Tafa brothers as well. Yeah, the Tafa brothers have a combined UFC record of 6-9. I'm surprised that both of them are still signed to the UFC. We've just seen Justin Tafa get slept by Talis Teixeira in 30 seconds. We've just seen Junior Tafa get submitted by Tuco Tacos. I think they should go back to boxing or go back to some sort of, striking promotion because neither of them can grapple. Get them in BKFC too, because that's what they built for. I don't even think they'd have a good career in BKFC. I'm still surprised they're still in the UFC, but yeah, the Tafa brothers, they need to get out of the UFC. But anyway, that's every UFC fighter every notable UFC fighter that I think should retire in 2025. For whatever reason it may be, whether it be by performances, age, perfect timing. These are fighters I think should retire. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Thank you for watching.